I think that's actually really good because I want to start to move into, I want to get back to this idea of finding our purpose and how do we find these elements that help to create change. Whether you're the intrapreneur coming to your superiors or you're, the heads of a department or a full organization and you want to start change. How do we start to determine, what are the factors that are going to help us move forward with this project, this new idea, this whatever?
Well, I think one of the things we like to do when we go into it is help people identify what the gaps are. And that sounds easy because it's sort of gaps between outcomes, gaps between what your approach is, gaps between how you set up your current steps. I actually have come to the conclusion after 20 years of consultation that it's rarely in business outcomes. Most businesses today are doing well enough, they wouldn't be surviving today if they didn't have good outcomes. You're not an unsuccessful bank.
Yeah.
There's no way. What we found more and more, the gaps are usually to do with process. So I have this wonderful quote that came from a colleague I worked with a few years ago, and who said, our outcomes are great, so everybody's going to the outcomes, we're going to improve the outcomes. But the process of getting there is like sliding down a rusty razor blade with no underwear on and putting salt on afterwards. Meaning, let's think that through. So yes, we get there. Yes, our outcomes are strong. So the problem is if you consistently look at the KPIs, they are good. They are good, and so that's the problem. We only looked at summative outcomes. Lagging. But what's the process to get there? And in today's world, there is no such thing as a stable team. Anyway, teams come and go. There used to be a world where teams could be together for 10, 15 years, even within, I'm sure you've had even within one institution, you've had different teams. So there's an opportunity to build team relationships. So process that underlying, and I'm going to say it sounds soft and squishy, that underlying trust, sense of confidence. Do I know this person? Can I work with them? How are we going to deal with consensus? How are we going to deal with when we don't agree? Are we going to push it under the surface? Are we going to ignore it? Every single organization we've gone into, they hand over my SOP. Everyone, look at our SOPs. I'm like, that doesn't tell me what you do when you disagree. Who handles that? Where does it go? And I 9 times out of 10, we've set up a couple of exercises where we've had, okay, here's your SOP, do it. But 9 times out of 10, they're all fighting. Or the PM has left the room, or the client has gone off. Because we don't address that piece, and without knowing the gap in that piece, it's very hard to facilitate. Once you bring that to the surface, it's not easy and it's not always comfortable, then people will go, oh, maybe we do need to do things in a different way. But you're doing it working with allies, not coming in against them.
And I think I'll tie 2 things in, and you're going to love it because purpose is in this. In terms of process, in our operations arm, we've been on a 5-year transformation journey that is all around process, and it's about making things simpler, faster, better, and that is the purpose: simpler, faster, better. And it's 3 words. Everyone down to the most junior employee understands it, knows how it relates to their job, knows how it relates to the tasks they do on a daily basis, knows the impact it has on them, on their peers, on their team, on their client. And the results we've gotten through that transformation are absolutely astonishing. And in the spirit of the transformation, massive role impacts in terms of moving people around the organization, so changing their allies, changing their teams, and our employee opinion survey results have gone up. Why? Because the purpose was clear. People understood why it was happening, what the implications were for them, what that end goal was in mind, and that message has stayed consistent, so we're now in year 7. And we are still on the simpler, faster, better simplicity roadmap. Yeah. They love, in our evaluation, we do a leadership program every year, and the evaluation, one of the things we always get comments, I love the strategy hasn't changed.
Yeah, continuity.
So our levers that we pull in relation to the strategy might change, but they know what that, and they also understand it's not a goal line. So it's not that I know what the goal line is, because the goal line keeps moving. So you can always be simpler, you can always be faster, you can always be better. Yeah. But that link to purpose is so compelling for people, and their connection and their understanding on how they fit within the ecosystem has been, I would say, the most critical thing to success.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an excellent point. If you guys follow Simon Sinek, and highly recommend you read his stuff. And he's coming out with a whole bunch of interesting game theory book in the next couple of months, which is fascinating. Point being, a purpose doesn't change You can change the marketing of it, you can change the word, but essentially there's a contribution component to it, and there's an impact component to it. And the words might change, but the sentiment never does. And if it does, you got a bigger problem than your strategy. But in that regard, you talked about the concept of stable 7 years of that. Today's world changes to change, right? And so actually in today's world, having that purpose to tie back to is even more important than it's ever been. Because to your point, it's not like you guys haven't changed in the last 7 years. You've had dramatic change. Every time you open the newspaper, there's this guy's going, that girl's joining, whatever the case may be. But it is always with a consistent, I can see we made that decision because it was driving one of those 3 words. And it also allows people to take ownership at a more junior individual level. If I can go to my boss and say, I'm working on this as a side gig project, here's how it directly relates to speeds, simple, faster, better. Look, if we do this, I can downgrade this. What it does is allow you to kind of go, listen, I've done the analysis, I've done the work, and basically it's really going down to either give me the money now or give it to me at the next cycle of money. Because you, boss, can't tell me we shouldn't be doing this. The timing might be off because we just blew out our $1 million that we needed, but the next time it comes around, you can't tell me this because it drives this, and allows you to keep leadership accountable. Because if they don't, you got to be like, whoa, hold on. You've just blown out 7 years of strategy.
And that's exactly, that was, the power of it was, while we were building the technical infrastructure in the first 2 years, is all of the innovation was grassroots. So it was all being identified at the employee base and being surfaced up. So we were able to execute, get those wins, get that traction, and then implement a layer of technology. Okay, and then we were on another cycle of employee innovation based on the new technology that was implemented. And so you've got innovation coming from 2 sides, and you've got employee buy-in in terms of, I actually am having this impact because I'm identifying things that I don't like doing, that I think are wrong, that I think don't have the client in mind, which is incredibly powerful.
If I could just add, as Sheldon said, just to bring it back on, I think we also have to some extent, as entrepreneurs and leaders, teach tolerance for change.
Yes.
It's not easy. And teach, and the same way, and I do bring it back to psychological level, we teach our kids to withstand failure. We teach our kids to understand you're going to lose at certain points. You're going to have that. And to some extent in organizations, I think we need to teach some tolerance for the change process. It can be disruptive. It can feel uncomfortable. But by you, as you said, recognizing that, supporting that, we're not judging it. We're not saying, oh, you're feeling it, we're not sort of putting that in a box to it. You're also maybe pushing your leadership. Sometimes they need to tolerate change or understand that just because they're ready to act doesn't mean everybody else is, or vice versa. So I do think we need to teach is perhaps the wrong word, facilitate some skills and competencies to withstand the change process.
And if you look at innovation by default has failure. If you're not failing, you can't be innovating. It's just not possible, right? And to your point, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and somebody made a great comment about it. The problem with that embrace failure thing is it's only half of the equation.
Yeah.
It's embrace the learnings from failure. What is the first thing we do when a project fails and we trap it? Everyone's like, great, get the hell out of Dodge, shove everything away, store some files, and let's just never talk about it again. That is a bad innovation failure. What you need to do after the failure is sit down and really dissect and spend a couple of weeks, months, depending on the size of the screw up, and have your leadership say, for the next couple of months, you're actually just doing an audit, which isn't really hugely valuable to driving innovation forward, but if we haven't learned from it, then it's a bad failure. And so I think that it's not just embracing failure and saying, oh, we gotta embrace it, love it. It's going, and when we fail, what are we gonna do about it? How are we gonna learn from it? How are we gonna document it? How am I gonna roadshow it? What are we gonna do? Because if you don't, and then you just get this thing, people jumping from failure to failure.
But actually it is, you said it wasn't bringing value, it is bringing value to the next nation.
If they learn from it.
If
If
they
they do what
identify.
I was with one of the big four, I'll name the name out of it. No, it was a consultancy. It's one of the big consultancies, and at the end of their reports, they just finished the project and moved to the next one because I gotta make money. So they don't learn from the project, so you just keep doing the same thing over. That type of failure is unacceptable.
So I think that's right. I think we started to touch on this throughout all your answers here. I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I'm gonna just open it up to everybody else and be cognizant of time where we can go on forever. I'm sure.
Shocking.
You guys can all go. We'll just
We don't need it.
But so we started to talk a bunch about, defining a purpose for why we want to change, why we want to move forward, and that, when people start to understand that, they can start to bring ideas. And maybe want to give people something to sort of take away from here, and maybe I'll start with you, Nicole, is if people in your organization, they start to understand this purpose, how is a good way for them to actually come and bring their ideas to management? Because there's a lot of companies where I guess people sort of sit around and they wait for management to dictate what's going to happen. But in a sort of entrepreneurial environment, it makes a lot of sense for people to have their ideas and say, hey, look, I think this is going to be. I think you said that somebody came to you once and said, this is my idea, and it falls under and it's going to make us faster. I'm sorry, I forgot that.
It's an internal brand.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
What's a proper way that
Yeah.
people should come and approach their higher ups and say, I want I have this idea, I want to try and make it happen, and try and get them on board with their idea rather than the traditional opposite way.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. One is when we went on that journey, they set up themselves, and it was kind of based on the team. Innovation councils. So people would be able to surface ideas. It would be, they would go through them. They would identify which one would have priority, and which is infrastructure, and that's not necessarily the point here. It was more to say, how do you successfully identify and frame an idea? So what are the things that you, as a junior employee in the organization, we want you to think about when you're bringing an idea forward? So client impact, number of times it gets done, scope, scale, number of touch points. So we gave them a very loose, lean framework to say, 5 whys. Ask why 5 times. Why do you do it the way you do it? Yeah. A very loose framework to help them frame the challenge. Because otherwise they come and they say, okay, this is broken and I hate doing it. Okay, well, I understand it's broken and you hate doing it, but what's the impact? And so in terms of prioritization, so I think that was really powerful that we gave that loose framework. Because it gives kind of the rules of engagement, and it really empowers people to identify what those opportunities are. And I think, you always say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. It's not about bringing me solutions, it's about bringing me a framed problem so that we together can look at opportunities to solve. And I would say it's exactly the same from a consultant perspective, is coming in is, really what's the, here's your pain point. Okay, well, what's all the interconnected pieces to that pain point? And then how do we build a solution aligned against it? I think is one of the most powerful things around innovation, is being able to frame what the problem is and really have an understanding of it before you even start to think about a solution.
Yeah, and just on that, I think you're right, and I think sort of having that concept of this is what I need to do to get through that Dragon's Den, that innovation council, whatever you want to call it, and that council's there is to both kind of listen to your ideas, but also kind of reinforce it before you go to the decision maker. But one question I've actually always liked to add to that thing is, talk to me about why this isn't going to work. Talk to me about why this is going to blow up in our face. What's CIBC going to do if we do this? And so I think we really shift with a lot of sort of our younger people who are very hungry and energetic, and we're going to change the world with this new digital app. Okay, great, love it. You've really laid out why it's going to work. Now I lay out how it's not going to work. We don't think a lot of it that way, but it forces you to uncover things about why it worked, and it makes them come with a more holistic ownership and solution problem.
Well, and that's really from a disintermediation problem. Yeah. That's really the difference, right? Is we come up with a solution and someone comes at it sideways and we go, oh, we didn't think about that, right? So that's the other tack onto, is to say someone else is thinking about it, so why don't you think about it at the same time?
I was at this bank last week with the product guys, and I looked around and I said, where's compliance? I'm like, oh, we'll bring them in at the end. I was like,
don't do that.
Compliance guy, and I want a legal lady, and I want them here in the design stage. Yeah. And because, by the way, compliance and legal are actually nice people. I know we all think they're not. They're actually nice people, and we literally we want to be part of the solution, but when you bring it to us 24 hours before, and I have to tell you, the regulators won't let us do it, I look like the a-hole, but my job is to keep us out of jail. Yeah. They include me in day one, and I would love to be part of that. And some of their insights, I've seen some compliance people come up with
day one.
Brilliant ideas. So
and bring them in and bring them part of the solution. Yeah. They're not there to be an obstacle, but that's the way they're perceived.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've had senior leadership say, oh, I can't really deal with them. We'll deal with them later. It's like, no, bring them to the table because and without fail, they go, thank you for asking us to be here. We didn't know that was a need. We didn't understand that could be done. And I have had compliance completely rewritten because they never get asked. So I would agree with you. As opposed to constantly looking at everybody as a source of opposition, nobody really consciously walks into a room to be in opposition. Nobody.
There's a phrase called the 10th person rule.
Yeah.
It's from a movie, and it basically boils down to that if 9 people in the room all agree, it's the 10th person's job to disagree. So when you do have everyone in the room going, this is a great idea, you go,
No, where's the
Dominic, why is this a bad idea? And maybe you don't know, but I want you to go away and come back, because the fact is, if we all agree,
There's a problem.
wrong. Because innovation is not about agreement.
Jocelyn plays that role for me.
Oh yeah. She's
Well, then you have a rock star, because you need Jocelyn everywhere. And it's not a mentality of, oh, I'm going to sink this. It's I'm going to get us to be unsinkable.
Yeah.
That is.
So.
The devil's advocate.